All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. I can see some folks jumping into the room, which is fantastic. I'm going to give just another minute or two here while we let everyone join. I am so excited today. This is kind of the first for us and hopefully the first of many. And John, you are absolutely the best first guest to have in this type of session. So John, welcome. We're going to be obviously talking a lot throughout the day, but it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Tyrell. Really excited to be a part of the conversation. Really excited to talk about how Scoop has changed things at ARP.
Awesome. Okay, well, we are, and this is pretty typical for us here at Scoop, we are going to start right on basically on the minute and dive in and make sure we get everyone out of here on time. And yeah, so a big thank you to John, you first and foremost, ARP Solar. For those jumping in, John is the Chief Operating Officer there. And I would also say you have been the Chief Scoop Architect, which I know what's amazing today is we have a whole bunch of customers and folks who are going through their, developing and building their business, their operations hub using Scoop. We also have a bunch of folks who are new to Scoop and maybe seeing this for the first time. And so I think it's really a treat and a privilege to have you, given not only the work that you've done in Scoop with your teams, but also just your passion towards operational excellence and building that conveyor belt of renewable operations. The lenses that we're going to look through today, and I'm going to spend about the first 5 to 10 minutes just teeing up our conversation. Then John and I are going to be able to just kind of go all the way into ARP Solar and learn more about the journey there. And then definitely stay towards the back half because we're going to basically be handing the reins completely off to you, John. You are going to take us inside some of the work that you all have been leading in Scoop, in the business. And we can actually see like, okay, what does this really look like? It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to be doing it and implementing it. And so hopefully we can tie a bunch of these pieces together. Now, for those of you who are new to Scoop or maybe seeing some of us, myself, Frida, Lucy, Babak for the first time, part of the reason for that is we have realized that we've spent largely, almost all of our time over the last 7 years painstakingly kind of obsessing over building this technology platform. And I'm going to talk about that on the next slide, which is, we really just believe that the pace at which the renewable energy industry is growing, expanding, changing, as you all know, requires a tool and a platform and a set of technologies that is really dedicated for us. So we've been really focused on building that product. And the second part of our focus has been on supporting our customers, because one of our beliefs from really early on is you can have a tool or a platform, an IT tool that checks all the boxes, looks great, does all the things. And if nobody uses it, that is not valuable, right? A tool that no one uses that can't be adopted is not creating and generating value in your business. That is actually a cost. And so the other area of our focus has been developing an understanding and an empathy, and then also a really strong set of skills to partner with our customers to help implement Scoop, to actually get folks on the ground, out on site, in the office, on the front lines of your operation using it. All that to be said, I know there are a lot of customers here today that have been wanting a session like this, and lots of sessions like this, John, yourself included, being one of the biggest champions, where we can start to talk about what other companies and what other teams and leaders like yourself are doing. And so my request as we dive into today is that if you enjoy this session, if you find value in it, let us know. Encourage us to do more of these, because I want to see that push for us to be back in the room, a month from now or 6 weeks from now doing the next one. So here's where we're going today. I'm not going to spend very much time on sections 1 and 2. I just want to make sure that everyone has a sense of kind of where Scoop fits in the industry, and then what's happening in the industry at large. That's going to help us anchor in this conversation a little bit. And then really the main focus for today is, John, learning more about yourself, your journey, and the amazing work that the ARP Solar team has done, and the path that you all have, conquered and continue to be on every day. And then, of course, handing it over to you to get a look inside your Scoop operations hub. And then, we have Frida and Lucy here, two of my amazing colleagues. We're all in the room because of them and all of the work they do to pull this type of event off, but they will be looking and watching the Q&A the entire time. So ask your questions early and often. They may even interrupt us if there's a theme that's arising, and that is absolutely encouraged, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session towards the end. So just briefly, I talked a little bit about where our passion and like where our focus is at Scoop. I think one of the other things, and I know this is going to dovetail really well into when you share on your side, John, is that one of the things that makes us a little bit different is we come from a construction management background, which I know some of you are aware of, but what that's meant is that we have empathy for understanding if your frontline teams aren't set up for success, good luck building all the fancy dashboards and reports that you want. They'll never be true and they'll never be accurate. And so what we found is there's this disconnect between the software that's been built over the last 20 years and what folks in renewable operations with the complexity and that distributed workforce, what you all need. And so with Scoop, we've really started on equipping the field, equipping your frontline teams in the office that are doing the work with the right set of tools, the right mobile application out on site, and the connection between all those teams to do the work, track the work, and have it roll up. Our hypothesis and our belief is that if we get that right, building the management reports and the workflow automations, and then the executive level dashboards and the integrations all can kind of come as a secondary effect of that. And so, our journey is to continue to build that ecosystem. And for today, we have our Scoop operations hub, which we're going to see a little bit of. And then we also have our Glue integration platform as a service, because part of us wanting to be the best in the industry in, mobile work, process automation, project management means that there are things that we're really choosing not to touch because there's already great solutions in accounting, in the sales CRM. And so that's where we're able to use a Glue integration to bidirectionally connect those. And then we have our Looksee analytics and reporting platform, which again, I think we're going to get a little peek of today, which is like the folks like John at the C-suite, at the ownership and executive level. You all need to know, what is the data telling us, right? What is the roll up of all of the hundreds and thousands of data points that are happening in your business every day and every week? What's the story? And so that is where we're able to pull in Looksee, where all that data comes into a visual dashboarding environment. Okay, last slide before we dive into the conversation. And I think, again, right, these are always important touch points. And something that we make a point to do in every presentation is, where's the industry, right? What are folks feeling and where are we at? And it's a really interesting dichotomy right now, right? Where the short term, there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of challenge across the entire supply chain, right down to the end consumer. We all know this. It's impacted from the macroeconomic environment all the way down to the state, jurisdictional, utility level, kind of very micro environment. And that's challenging, right? There is a kind of bearish, hawkish feel that I'd say we all can feel and sense. But what's interesting is when we zoom out, right, and we zoom out even to 2028, 2030, the story really hasn't changed, right? The growth and the electrification, the acceleration of renewable infrastructure is only going in one direction. And so even the stat of solar installations to triple by essentially 2030 is pretty staggering. John, I know you mentioned one thing in our previous conversations that, if it's not really about if this comes or not, if this growth continues, it's when. And so if it's not if, but it's when, then really the conversations or the lenses that I want to use today for thinking about where the industry is and where it's going is, how do we make sure we survive this stage that we're in, which really is about resilience. So reducing costs, building those systems and processes so we can be as lean, but still effective, and equipping and empowering our teams as possible, but not losing sight of how that resilience building also gets us ready for growth, right? So how do we make sure that the systems that we build today to survive and get ready for the next chapter of growth, right? The next up and down on the solar coaster, as cheesy and cliche as that sounds, it's a real thing. As markets are accelerating, industries are growing. How do we make sure we don't lose sight of making sure that our systems will scale, our processes will scale, and our operation can take advantage of that next chapter of growth versus being victim to it? So even if we do survive, then we're stuck because we get bottlenecked with all of these small inefficiencies. So those are really the two lenses that we'll be kind of looking through today: resilience today, growth readiness or preparedness and capacity in the future. So with that, all of that being said, I want to do a bit of a pause. And John, thank you for listening to me for the better part of 8 minutes there. I would love to, formally bring you into the room and just maybe get a bit of an introduction to yourself and the beginning of your journey at ARP Solar, kind of how did that come to be, and what did you come into that operation, kind of with the scope and context, and then feel free to share a little bit about ARP as a whole as well as a business.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to be here, Tyrell. Scoop has made a major impact to the operations of our organization. And so I'm really happy to talk about it, kind of share some of the successes that we've had. Myself, my name's John McNamara. I have the distinct pleasure of running operations for ARP Solar, Appalachian Renewable Power. I come from an operations development background. I've got an MBA from Capital University, picked up a Master of Sustainability Leadership from Arizona State University as well. I've got my NABCEP PV Associate, and also have the pleasure of serving as the board president for Green Columbus, which is a nonprofit here in Central Ohio that focuses in on intersectional environmentalism and tree equity. So sustainability is at the core of what I love to do. And at the end of last year, I had the opportunity to come on board with this incredible group of folks at ARP Solar. You've got it on the screen here, 2008, founded by Gary Easton. And that's definitely the heart and soul of what we're doing. Gary has really been at the forefront of this industry. He installed his first solar system on his own home in 1999, a master electrician, NABCEP PV installation professional, sits on the board of Green Energy Ohio. And then the organization, we do residential commercial installs throughout Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky. We've got a team of about 20 incredible solar heroes. And we actually have 4 different apprentices that we're bringing through the IEC apprenticeship electrical program as well. I think our story is very similar to a lot of folks that are on the webinar. We've been on that solar coaster for 15 years now. And we see a lot of opportunity coming out of the IRA. But as I've talked in the past, there's a lot of back to that IRA. There was a lot of focus in manufacturing. And so I think there's a little bit of a lag, and we're going to see as installers that wave coming. So I came on board kind of looking at what can we do to prepare ourselves for that? What can we do to build processes out that will allow for that scalability so that when this influx comes, we're better prepared for it and we can manage it and really take advantage of that opportunity without getting out over our skis. So yeah, that's a little bit about ARP.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. That was beautiful. And I'm gonna stop the screen share here so you and I can kind of just have a bit of a dialogue and discussion. And I think, so if you think back to when you were having those conversations with Gary and, thinking about the opportunity at ARP, give us a bit of a sense of, and I think I have 2 questions. How did you orient yourself as you started to come settle into the organization and really understand what's going on and where are the opportunities? And then maybe bring us into like, what did it look like? What was a day in the life? And what were some of the big things that you saw right off the bat that you thought, okay, this is where we're going to really, change the game, so to speak, in terms of getting ARP Solar ready for the next stage?
Yeah, I had really identified that I wanted to be a part of a solar organization, and I was fortunate enough to cross paths with Gary. We started to sit down and talk about, hey, what is present day ARP? What are the challenges there? Where would I be able to help? And he invited me down graciously to the organization to meet some of the folks. And as I got down there, I started to observe some of the processes that they had in place. And it certainly was, 14 years of riding that solar coaster that had gotten them there and struggling through those periods where maybe the volume wasn't as great. And you're building out processes through Google Sheets, through Excel. Folks have their own Word document on what they're doing in their step of the process, leveraging their emails quite a bit, and a lot of disconnected steps in the process, a lot of manual handoffs, and a lot of searching for information. We talked about being detectives at ARP in the early days, that you really had to spend a lot of your time out there searching for information. And so that was the conversation that Gary and I had, is to say, hey, how can we centralize our operations, How can we create an environment where we have a single viewpoint into a project from the beginning to the end, that we can organize our information so that as we continue to scale, and that's really where ARP was, is they were already starting that growth. But as you start that growth, if you don't have those processes in there, the headaches and the friction points really exponentially grow and really drag down the operation, the speed of the operation, and the ability to deliver great installations with an elevated customer experience. So that's the end of last year, coming on board with an opportunity to kind of step into building out those processes and ensuring that there are good, clean handoffs along the way.
Yeah, and I think what strikes me is, for Gary and the whole team there, and again, I think this is probably similar to a lot of the folks on this call and the industry in general, is these businesses are born and grown out of so much passion, like an unrelenting amount of passion, all the way down to like the folks, on trucks, on sites. And so it's amazing. Like we are so inspired to see what is possible with a Google Sheet, with an Excel document, with a couple of text message, WhatsApp threads. And it's amazing, right? Because it really shows the passion that I think a lot of folks in this industry and businesses and leaders have. When you were, kind of ramping up and understanding the landscape, was there ever a breaking point that you felt like, okay, we've really got to accelerate this or focus on it? Or were there some like key things that you saw happening that just kind of exacerbated how challenging the lack of some of these next layer of processes were kind of in the day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. Passion's the right word. I used to say that ARP was run on passion and duct tape. That if it wasn't for the absolute love that our team has for both solar and for Gary, it was a really challenging moment in time. And what it was really doing is it was really forcing people to do 120% of their job. And an
Mm,
interesting thing happens when you've got folks doing 120% of their job, is they're dropping things because it's not physically possible to do that. And yet you're creating this environment of resentment because you really are going above and beyond in what you're doing. And yet we're seeing negative outcomes coming from it. There was a conversation, we were doing a post-mortem on a negative customer interaction that we had. We had a problem arise out on a project site, and we got done kind of working through the moment. And I paused in that and I said, okay, so curious question here. What are we going to do in the future to prevent this from happening again? And somebody dismissed it just as quick as they could and said, oh, John, we do not have time for that. We need to move on to the next thing. And that's terrifying to me because all I know is that we're about to run into the same problem again. Maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's 2 months, maybe it's another year down the road. But if we don't have the capacity and the structure to be able to identify these friction points for our customers, all we're going to do is go through these pain points over and over again. And so that was a lot of the impetus to really take a step back, look at our process. Conveyor belt of operations is a term that gets used a lot at Scoop, and it's one of my favorite terms. Looking at those inputs, what we're going to ask the associate to turn that input into, and then what the expectation of that output is, and then creating an environment where they can be successful in going through that process and creating those outputs.
yeah, yeah. Well said. I mean, there's so much. There's so much in there, and I'm sure a lot of it resonates for folks on the session today. And I guess one of my questions, I don't want to spend too much time here, but I'm mindful that there's everyone goes through this exercise of, okay, we understand the landscape and what we need to solve. We're starting to have conversations around that, and then there's this turning to what do we need to get in place to solve it, right? And that's that going out to the market, and Scoop is obviously just one of many solutions and options for yourself as a leader and for all of these companies and businesses. How did you go out to market? Like maybe just give some feedback and advice just in terms of how you started that research and due diligence process, and was there anything that was really helpful for you along that path? And ultimately I would be curious from your lens, kind of what was it that drew you to Scoop in the end?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm most grateful for in this role is our industry. is the community of solar. And I think that there is an overwhelming feeling that we're in this for the right reasons. There's some poor actors out there, and really we work hard to create that community so that we can serve the customers without pushing them to those poor actors out there. So I turned to some of my peers, the
Mm,
community, the network that I have, and started asking, hey, here's the challenges that we're having. What should I be looking at? And I was fortunate enough to have a few good folks mention Scoop a couple times, and then in a mildly insane way, got into the conveyor belt of operations series, which I think is a 5 or 6 hour series, where you and Frida really go through this concept of conveyor belt of operations, of process management. And I really saw a lot of the solutions for the challenges that we had for today coming out of that. I saw a focus for the field, and you spoke to this as well, that if you don't have a tool that the field can use well and successfully, it doesn't matter what you have on the back end for the reporting, that information isn't going to pull through to there. I also saw the scalability of Scoop, the fact that there's no limit to the number of users that you can have, that the users don't have to be only from your organization.
mm,
I have partners who have access to our Scoop, so they can go out and they can check on where their project is. They can submit information to us. So not only am I solving this problem for today, but I'm also building a process that's future protected in as much as that it can scale, and is not affected by the number of users or the amount of storage that I'm having. That's a wonderful thing about Scoop, is the repository that it is for documents. The
mm,
number of places that we were keeping documents in the past is terrifying. And this brings it all into one centralized location. It stops us from having to log into other people's email when they're on vacation. And so it was really that list of different solutions that was in there. And then you partner it up with the great people that I've had the opportunity to meet. I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Mac Jarvis, who helps me with all the different questions that I have on Scoop, and is just incredible and focused on my success. So it's been a wonderful process and a partnership that I've had over the last 8 months with y'all.
thanks, John. That was more than I was asking for, but I appreciate it. And I think at the end of the day, look, like it's a really, I think one thing I've come to appreciate is it's a huge decision, right? Like it is not trivial, Scoop or anything else. When you're talking about like the bones of your operation, the hub, so it is a really important conversation. And I think like you went out to your network, maybe if there's one takeaway, it is plugging into those networks in the community. They're there, and we're all going in the same direction, right? So I appreciate that sentiment as well. A couple more really kind of pointed questions before I want to hand it over to you. I mean, there's so many different directions that I want to go, but one that I want to touch on, because okay, we've talked about kind of the lead up to Scoop and this next chapter of ARP Solar's journey. And I touched on it at the beginning in the introduction that it's one thing to find the right tool, it's another thing to roll it out, right? And not only get adoption, but get champions.
Yeah,
And we know that is not easy. It doesn't matter what tool, what technology, we are talking about change, right? And we all know the story of how challenging and fearful change can be. What was your strategy, and how did you go about equipping and empowering the team and bringing them in and ultimately really navigating this amazing effort to get Scoop adopted and really thriving in the operation? And obviously there's still work that goes on every day and making it better, but what was your initial kind of approach to that?
yeah. Hindsight is 2020, and if I could climb into my time machine and go back to January, February, John McNamara, who is building out Scoop processes, um, simpler is better. And I think that in my version 1.0 of Scoop, I was really trying to roll in a lot of the bells and whistles of Scoop before I rolled it out to the team. We'll talk a little bit here about conditional display rules. We'll talk a little bit here about auto tasks. And I wanted to build those out in the beta version of Scoop for ARP. And what I really look back and recognize is going simpler in the beginning and then adding those in actually is what gets you the buy-in. Going simply and then going back out to the user and saying, how can I make this a better experience for you? Our goal is really to put the right information in front of the person at the right time so that they can execute on their role. And so getting their feedback is really what's going to lead to that success. And honestly, one of my favorite parts of Scoop is that real time ability to make changes. We maintain a Slack channel called Scoop Changelog. And that is an opportunity for folks to say, hey, it would make my life easier if X, Y, or Z happened. And I can get a notification on that. I can pop into Scoop configuration, publish a change in 5 minutes, and say, hey, refresh your page, go out and see if that makes sense to you and if that supports you better in what you want to do. And that is what got me the buy-in, is saying,
Mm.
hey, I know that you have autonomy in your role. I know that you have knowledge and you have skills that you want to be successful with. Let me get things out of your way, put the right things in front of you, and allow you to be successful in that moment. And that's really where we saw people come on board with it, and really, really embrace Scoop.
John, and I'm going to pull back from one of our previous conversations because, and this resonated for me, and I probably need to hear it in my simplistic view of the world, but you use this analogy of a vehicle and putting tires on a vehicle. Would you be willing to just kind of share that framework?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talk about tightening the lugs when you're changing a tire. That when you go to change a tire on your car, you do the star pattern where you tighten the lugs a little bit. They may not be loose. The vehicle may not even be safe at that point, but you go on to the next one, you tighten it a little bit. And you look to improve how that tire is adhered to the vehicle. And that was really a lot of the philosophy as we rolled out Scoop, to say, hey, perfect is not the goal right now. Good is the goal right now.
Mm.
And let's continue to evolve that out. So we will look at each one of the different apps that we use within Scoop and look for different opportunities to improve the way we're communicating with each other. But we're not looking to do it all in one fell swoop. If you go to change the tire on your car and you put one lug on there and you tighten it all the way down, and then you do the next one, the next one, the next one, you're going to have a really bumpy ride as you go down the road.
Yeah.
And for us, it's made more sense to just take it in a progressive mode, take it in a way we're going around and we're getting better and we're evolving each and every day.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing that. I think even for me, it's like, that orchestration of the lugs, as simple as it is, you're also acknowledging the value that each of those hubs play in the whole. And there are some really important parallels as it relates to the people on our teams and the simple acknowledgement that your feedback is as critical to this as what I've put in front of you. And so even to hear that Slack channel is still alive and well today, it is really valuable, and I appreciate that. And actually, I'm able to kind of take more and more out of that analogy. So thanks for redescribing it. Last question, I'm gonna have to bite my tongue to keep us moving forward, but give me a little bit of a view, and even if you could, use an example of like a year ago versus today, like what does the world at ARP Solar look like today? What are some of those glimmers of excitement that you get when you see the team working today versus when you came into it? And maybe like what is the team experience, and in terms of the output of the operation, how would you describe the change that you've seen, and where you all are going?
I think for me, text messages are probably the most emotional component of our evolution at ARP. I think in the beginning of this year, text messages were 90% panic, 90% a need for something and reaching out to the entirety of the organization for that need. And so
Mm.
you would be getting these texts at 10 o'clock at night. You'd be getting these texts at 5 o'clock in the morning, when the installation crews are rolling into the warehouse. It was nonstop and it was really negative. And having a centralized communication platform Having a space where people go to first to find their answers and are most likely to find the answers to the questions that they have, it eliminates that energy almost completely. And so now an off hours text message for me is most likely a birthday wish or a funny picture that's rolling through about something that happened during the day. And so we see that
That's
change.
awesome.
Yeah, no, it's a real energy, and sometimes you don't recognize the change as it's
Yeah,
happening. But you look back and you go, oh my goodness, the vibe here was completely different 10 months ago than it is today. And you take a deep breath and go, okay, all right, let's go around and let's tighten some more lugs and let's keep getting better. So
that's awesome.
yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, we run teams and organizations that are made up of people, and if those people aren't here, it makes it really hard to do the good work, right, that we're doing. So yeah, cannot be understated. Okay, with that, we're going to come back and close things off. And I've got a couple more questions for you at the end, John, but I would love to invite you to go ahead and share your screen. And as you're doing that, we're going to start with one slide that will just help me provide a bit of context for everyone who's new here. So if you're able to, John, pull up that slide deck. And if not, I
Uh,
can always I
yeah,
can just speak to it. I'm going to put you on the spot. I can also pull it up on my side.
if you don't
Um,
mind.
sure. Yeah. Okay. Let me go ahead and do that. And this will be we're going to briefly go through this, and then I'll hand it back over to you. So really, and you should all be able to see this here. I've basically got my data architecture of Scoop slide, and for everyone, and maybe for even some customers on the call, but certainly for folks who are new, this is just a really important anchoring slide as John's going to take us a mile deep into the platform, where this ties back to our focus on the field, right? So quite simply, if we start at the bottom of this visual in our platform, we call our executable kind of work order items, we call those scoops, right? So site survey, design, permitting, install, job closeout. You can imagine those are phases of a project, but they're ultimately, pieces of work that need to be done. So in our platform, just from a language perspective, we call those scoops. And a scoop can be fully accessed out in the field. So if you have a technician that's going out to do a site survey for a new residential install, and then they're going to open up their Scoop mobile app. Doesn't matter whether they're online or offline. They're going to tap into the site survey for, say, Alex Hahn, your newest customer. And that will give them all of the information and documentation of the customer and the job site already. It will also give them all of the things that they need to do to complete that site survey, and then a workflow that will trigger notifications and updates to the next person. And so each of these scoops, each of these project phases and service visit types are fully configurable by what we call an app template. And I know, John, you're going to show those app templates. So I want to just anchor us in that language. We're really able to build a template once that is all the different logic and conditions and things that we want the folks in the field to experience, so they get this simple, easy, step-by-step view. But if we go one step higher than that, we know like no site survey happens in isolation. It's coming from the sales team, and it's going to eventually move into design, engineering, permitting. And so that's where we have this concept of projects and project templates. It's especially important right now because I know this conversation in the industry of diversifying our product offering, maybe adding in an EV or a battery, or even going into home electrification, home efficiency. And so the ability in Scoop to be able to create multiple project templates and handpick those phases or those app templates and scoops that you want to become your lineup, knowing that the automation will drive notifications and updates and handoffs from one team to the next, right? As that project progresses. The last step is, no project happens in abstract or isolation. It is always related to a physical job site. And there are very important attributes about that site that oftentimes, and we all know this, change the permitting process, change potentially the inspection or PTO process, and even the design and engineering phases. And so every project that is made up of a number of phases or scoops is always connected to what we call a client site, and that is simply the physical location for that job that houses things like AHJ, jurisdiction, utility type information. So I'll leave it at that, and I know, John, you're going to kind of describe things as you go along, and so I'll let you take the screen back over and now jump in right where you were expecting to.
Awesome. Perfect. Perfect. I definitely appreciate it. Yeah, no, I get excited to talk about Scoop,
I know
and
you do.
we're really proud of the architecture that we put together here. I'm going to kind of zoom in and out of ARP operations and how we're using Scoop. I'll go from the 5,000-foot view down to a pretty granular view. I'm going to start us off at about 1,000 feet, just to give a little bit of an overview of how we advance things through our conveyor belt of operations, how we take a project through. And a lot of the philosophy behind it is that we're creating one pathway. And then whether it's an ARP job that we sold from the beginning, or if it's coming from a partner that we're installing for, our goal is to align it to the same process flow so that the folks at each different stage aren't really seeing a difference depending on what's generating that project. So we look at the template for our residential installs, and you were talking about the different components of the Scoop flow. This is our template. And so in our template, we look at 5 different phases of an install. The sales opportunity, in that one, we're taking a lead and we're really turning it into a design proposal and an agreement from the customer to come out and do that site survey. We're going to take a look at that site, make sure we're gathering all the right information. We're going to use our site survey Scoop within that to gather all the pictures, the information relative to the job, so that when we go to do our pre-install admin and use that Scoop, we're able to get that permitting going. We're able to get interconnection and that final plan set for the customer space. Install, obviously, that's where the field team goes out. We've got our installation folks in there. And not only do we build in our installation Scoop, I think a lot of us use, we came from Site Capture, which is a platform where you can document images of the installation, of the work that you've done to make sure that you've got a good record of that. Scoop actually gives us an opportunity to go a step farther. We build out a pre-install site walk, give instructions to that field tech to document any pre-existing damage that might be out there. If anything should get damaged on the way, there's flows within our Scoop to help identify that damage and to alert the appropriate folks within the organization that something's happened in that situation. And then we finish out with a post-install Scoop, and that's where we're taking that inspection. We're turning that into the utility to get permission to operate. And then we're finally closing out that customer from there. So that's a little bit of a view into our templates.
Hey John,
Yeah.
before you jump on, and you don't need to click into this necessarily, but I just
Mhm.
noticed you're taking advantage of, for example, those conditions down at the bottom. Can you just speak to what those are, those conditional inclusions, kind of
Yeah,
how they could apply?
yeah, absolutely. So it's a number of different items on there. So this one, I believe, in particular, is relating to a partner that we have that we don't have to handle the post-install side of things. So it
Nice.
will actually remove that stage of the template from the work that we have to do because it's not applicable. On the front end of this, I have one that's, oh, it's super bright and I can't remember. I can't remember what I built it for. The Scoop is a gift that keeps on giving for me because it has evolved so much throughout the years or throughout the year, that you'll go back in and you'll check something and you'll go, oh, wait, that's happening because I built a logic rule in there or a conditional display rule in there to evaluate that this is a battery mount. And so I need to have an additional section for commissioning the battery as well. So yeah, throughout the entirety of our template, especially when you get into our actual Scoops themselves,
Yep.
we really rely on those conditional display rules. And that is definitely, that's that part that I'm talking about. Get in there simple first. I think, in my initial version, I was trying to build out a lot of that logic in there. Allow that to grow organically as you use the platform and listen to the folks, and that's where you're getting that buy-in from folks out there as well.
I love it. So
um,
just to summarize, I'll summarize that, and then I want to hand it back over to you to keep driving. And I don't know if we're going up or down on the 1,000. We're at 1,000 feet right now. But what I hear you saying is like you've built this project template. It's kind of a standard Resi install flow, maybe light commercial, but this template can do different things for different project types, and those conditional inclusions kind of know what to look for. Is it a partner? Is it potentially is something else happening? And it's kind of lining up those scoops for every customer in potentially a slightly different fashion based on those inputs, like you said. So that will be what those conditional inclusions are doing.
Yeah, and it's a really cool thing because it's global fields. So it goes along the entirety of the project. So if I'm in the sales opportunity, I can actually make a choice in that stage that affects something that happens in the post install as well. So it is throughout the entirety thing. One of the things that we love to use is an installation alert. It is a field that is a yes no question. Does this job need an installation alert? And if you answer yes, those conditional display rules, and I'm getting ahead of myself definitely because I'm getting excited, um, open up a new field for a text box. And what that does is it physically changes the scoop field for when the installation team is out there. That there is normally at the beginning of an installation scoop, it says the customer's name. But if you change that to say, hey, there's something important, the dog likes to run, they get there, the tree out front is a 150-year old tree that has so much memories to them. Make sure we don't damage the tree at all. Whatever it is, it goes to the top of that installation scoop and physically changes what that installation team is seeing, so they know, hey, there is something super important going on here. But
Love it.
that's the
So
150-foot view, and
yeah,
we'll stop off there. Yeah.
as you're teeing up, I think we're going down now into maybe a
Mhm.
little bit more into app templates. But I think about, okay, well, without something like Scoop, how does that get solved? And really, I think it happens in one or two of two ways. The person leading the post install remembers to go and ask that sales team member or someone on the project team, like, hey, do I need to know anything, or what about this? Or it gets totally forgotten.
Yeah.
And hopefully nothing, bad happens downstream of that. But I think that's kind of where you're connecting upstream, automatically connects downstream, and you've actually been able to like configure it in ways that makes it abundantly clear those updates. So back over to you. Let's go down to app templates and then maybe up to look-see.
Absolutely. So we'll look at our Scoop side of things here. So these are the different apps that we utilize. Workflows and auto actions is what I wanted to focus in a little bit here. Within, the conveyor belt of operations at the 5,000-foot level, or at the 1,000-foot level, you can zoom into the actual scoop itself and say, hey, what are those stages within that? And I really like to look at our post-install scoop on this, because it is a very linear and very order of operations for finishing out that customer. So as an associate is going through this, they're going to schedule that inspection, and then 100% of the time, we're going to pass that inspection. And so the associate is going to flip that into inspection passed. And that's just progressing this down through the conveyor belt, getting us to closing out the customer. But at the same time, I have these auto actions in here. So I know if an inspection is passed, there's a number of things that need to happen. I need to invoice out and pay for or get the customer to pay for the job. I need to inform my interconnection specialist that an inspection has been passed and pass that information along to them. And I need to inform my office manager to let them know that this project is moving along as well. And if they need to update the customer or the salesperson needs any updates as well, it's communicated out to them. And that's all done out through auto tasks. This is one that's going to my interconnection specialist. So I've passed this. It's going to send an email to them. Or no, I'm sorry, it's going to assign a task to them to say, hey, this inspection has been passed. Please file the PTO for this. It happens automatically, and it automates what we're doing in a way that reduces those dropped balls of communication as you move from one person to another.
And so, John, do you find like on the front end, for the folks on the team, are they using like their task backlogs on like a weekly basis to see, okay, what's coming in, what's been assigned to me, what are the due dates? I'm going to work through that. Is that kind of happening, and a way of organizing the work for each team member?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple different ways that they approach getting their work and verifying. Using these tasks is absolutely, it's one of the most automated ways. It's really nice to make sure that projects aren't getting dropped as they move from one stage to a different. The other one that we use quite a bit, and I don't know if I really focus in on it as much, is filters on reporting.
Hmm.
Because these fields are global, you can rely on different fields. We have an interconnection field where we put the status of the interconnection. And so I can say to my permitting person, and actually we'll go to plan set on that one, that the plans
Yeah.
haven't been stamped yet, that plans are out for stamping, and that my permitting person can go out, they can use a filter in their reports and say, hey, that's not ready for me to work yet, but I'm going to go ahead and flip my filter to which ones have we gotten stamps back from, and I know that that's work that I need to approach as well. And so there's a
Awesome.
couple different ways, depending on the workflow, depending on the associate, that they can get information, centralized information, shared information, and make sure that this job continues to move forward.
Love it. Love it. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Anything else on
Uh,
the app template side that you want to touch on?
no, I think the app template. So this will step down to like the 10-foot view.
Perfect.
Yes, yes, and this is one of my favorites. Conditional display rules, and you can tell that one of my favorites is conditional display rules.
This is going to be a year later after starting simple.
Yes, yeah, yeah, that is absolutely a wonderful disclaimer to make. This is a long time growing. Okay, so this is only for site survey. This is the number of different conditional display rules that I have. It is really changed the way that our folks are able to do work. With a site survey, there are, hundreds of things that could potentially be important for a job. And they're not always important for a job. I
Right.
think about it as sitting down for dinner. If I'm sitting down for dinner and I'm having a slice of pizza, I don't need a salad fork. I don't need a dessert fork. I don't need an oyster shucker, whatever those are. And so I wouldn't set those out on my placemat to sit down and eat a slice of pizza. And so what conditional display rules do is they make sure that I have the right information out there. That if it's a roof array that we're going out to do a site survey for, we actually have a question that says, how many different roof planes is this going to be on? And if we have multiple roof planes, then we need to get pictures of attic access, of within the attic for each one of those different roof planes, to make sure that we have the right information to go out and do a successful installation. This one right here, NEC, is one of the ones that's prevented us from running into a number of bad situations.
Hmm.
NEC takes the field that says, hey, the main service panel meets NEC requirements, that it's got clearance, it's free of water sources, the cover's off. If you answer yes to this, all sorts of people get notified. Not only does the scoop change and it asks for a number of pictures of why you're saying that that's there, but it also communicates with our construction manager and our office manager that there is a huge red flag at this job, and we need to be very careful if we're moving forward from that.
Wow.
And so it prevents us from getting into situations that we wouldn't want to be in.
Wow. And John, one point that I want to call out before we jump into Looksee is like, and I've seen this before. I've seen the mastery that you've developed over conditional display rules, or we call them CDRs. I just wanted to make the comment that like I don't think our team has built a single one of these for you. You have largely, which is important, right? Because while this seems really like there's a lot here, and I could see it being really overwhelming immediately, like over time, you and the team have been able to identify where are those lugs, what's that little turn, where is that little rule going to go in to make life easier for the front end. So just to call out, like this is a business operations configuration kind of workspace that you've built out over time.
Yeah, and I'll make 2 points on that. One, it's definitely not solo me.
Yeah.
I have a wonderful partner in Mac, who is there as a resource. Some of these conditional display rules, they can get complex. If A equals this and B equals something different, then I want you to output C. And just as a warning out there, I think a lot of people will look at something like this and say, oh my God, I'm going to break that. And there is a possibility that you do. And I did once. I did once and I broke it and I rung up Mac and I was like, I just broke it all. The whole thing, it's ruined. And Mac swept in, not only fixed the problem in the moment and got me back together right away, but also reassured me that an interesting thing that Scoop does is there's a backup of this every night. And so let's just say I ruined the whole thing. We would step back a day and we would still have everything that we had out there. So it gives me the confidence to go out and do things like this, to experiment a little bit, to push a little bit on these conditional display rules in a way that benefits the team, benefits the customer, and I still feel supported and I still feel like I have the tools to be able to do what I need.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think that's that partnership, right? That like all, and I think for us, that really structured and highly facilitated onboarding, because there's even a point where we want you to break things early on and we want you to really go and test and experiment before it's live. So all that to be said, I'm going to give you, John, 2 minutes on Look-See. Let's shift
Yeah.
over there and then we'll open it back up. We'll bring Frida and Lucy in and we'll ask a couple of questions before wrapping up in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. So real quick, look-see is that 5,000 foot view. This is what you get, and this is where it gets really exciting for forecasting and for leadership. So we get to look at, on the simple level, how many scoops are we creating? And so we can see how much we're leveraging this platform, how much it's benefiting our customers. We're getting into timing. We had some clear out that we had to do from the previous legacy of how we were doing, but we're able to better define how long it takes to move through different sections of the work as well, and we're able to project and forecast our work as well. This is something that Michael Moore is somebody that I will shout out as well at Scoop. Michael Moore is our support for Looksy, and where conditional display rules are something that kind of work in my mind and I feel comfortable building those out. I think at a pivot table, Tyrell. And I am so grateful for everything that Michael does to help us build out this information. These two graphs right here are
Yeah. What
really,
are we looking
really
at?
getting tight, and they are total invoiceable amount by installation. And so this is the financial component of what's coming into our organization. And we actually time it out for how long it's going to be until installation. So we've got a few flags that are built into our pre-install uh, scoop that let us know how long it's going to be before we see the job done. And so we can actually look at, hey, 1 to 2 weeks out, here's where we're at. 6 to 8 weeks out, here's where we're at. And not only on the financial side of things, but we can also look to the size of the system arrays
Yeah.
and understand where our workforce is going to need to be, and how far we're going to be planning out these different jobs that are out there. So it really adds a lot of visibility into what's coming down the pipeline for us.
Wow, that is so amazing. And maybe I'll just try and tie those two together because obviously we're coming up on time and want to
Mhm.
turn it over to the team. But we looked at the first screen you showed in Looksee was scoops, right? You see that like ramping up of scoops. Those are all jobs that folks are working on. And then we see in that second visual, the aggregate, what's coming, where are things at, what's kind of the macro level of our business. And what I think is important here is like you've got all of your 20 folks and third parties that are working in the Scoop platform. And just by them filling out one of their scoops, transitioning the workflow, Looksee is picking all that data up and it's aggregating it and pulling it into one picture. So it's not, there's an elimination of, okay, I did my work in the site survey. Now I need to go and update the spreadsheet because that's going to go and update a report and a visual. Those two systems talking together kind of help the folks on the front lines do the work that is needed to actually move the job forward. And then, you and Michael and the team seeing Looksee helps okay, this is where we're at and we can be pretty confident in it. So thank you, John. That was awesome. I know it's just a sneak peek and a bit of a taste, and hopefully the first of many conversations that you and I are going to have like this. Lucy, Frida, we probably have time for one or two questions, and would love to hand it over to you before we wrap up here today. Go ahead, Lucy.
Okay, yeah, we have a couple ones here. So the first one for John actually is maintaining Scoop your only job at ARP?
Yeah, so I saw that question come through out of the
Yeah.
corner of my eye, and I almost chuckled out. Well, I've been trying to stifle the laughter for a little bit now. Absolutely not. I like so many of you who are on this call. We're wearing so many different hats. I was out on a project site flying the drone, and somebody came out and said, "You're the COO and the drone pilot," and I'm like, amongst other hats as well. I think there's a little bit of a question around lift. I was probably spending in the beginning of Scoop about 5 to 8 hours a week, really building and architecting. It definitely varies at this point. I think we have a pretty tight set of lugs on this, but we're looking to evolve it. And so if I want to get into a deep project with it, I could definitely architect for 4 to 5 hours a week still if I wanted to. But the maintenance side of things, an hour or two here, just to make sure that all your fields have the right information that your folks need.
I want to make one quick comment there, and for everyone else in the room here, we'll go over by a couple of minutes because I know there's a lot of questions, and as long as John, you're okay with that.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's yourself, John, as the COO, or whether it's someone that you train and dedicate to Scoop, I don't think it's an oversight. Maybe that's just from, we've worked with hundreds of companies that you're talking about the operational system, again, whether it's Scoop or anything else, that is running a large operation responsible for a whole bunch of things. So this conversation of dedicating a little bit of time and making sure there's an owner for the Scoop platform, it's something that we've identified is so important. And when we find owners and executives who align with that importance, it's amazing to see today what you've developed in those little turns of the lugs. But it doesn't work the other way around, right? If you sign up with Scoop or any technology tool and it just sits up in a corner and nobody really owns it and no one cares about it, you miss part of the equation. So I appreciate the amount that you've invested, but also to call out that sometimes it's a project coordinator, sometimes it's an operation manager. It's the dedication to being 1 foot in the operation, 1 foot in the systems that's driving scalability. That's really the key.
And the buy-in, the more that you're able to get in there and make those changes
right.
and make it an evolved space for your
Virtuous
associates.
cycle.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay, Lucy, back to you.
Terrific. Thank you. Yeah. And as you mentioned, we might go a couple minutes over because we're seeing more questions coming in, but so appreciate the time. So we have a question here about loving to see ARP kind of behind the sales lead part. So are you relying on Scoop alone for the pre-contract stage, or are you integrating with other sales and design tools for that stage, particularly of the project?
So we utilize Open Solar for our design. And so we will be out in that platform. We really only use Open Solar for the proposal and our integrated finance partner. Beyond that, as far as leveraging it more like a CRM, we use Scoop for that side of it. So all the customer information, address, where they are in the sales process, temperature of the customer, what they're interested in, that all pulls through. And that feeds through into the site survey as well. So in the sales Scoop, we actually have the sales associate fill out how many different roof planes are we on, how many different arrays, how many different panels, is it a ground mount, is it a battery, and that feeds the logic into that site survey. So then when that associate goes out with the site survey, they're looking for the information that they need the most.
Awesome. And what other programs did you look at using before you decided to go into Scoop, and what ended up being kind of like the key reason that you chose Scoop as your tool?
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely looked at Trello. We looked at Podio as well. For me particularly, I don't come from a very robust solar background. And so having a platform that is focused in on solar and does really support the conveyor belt for solar was really important to me on one level. And then we've talked about it a few times, the scalability. Users on Trello, users on Podio, that's not a fixed cost that you have there. And as you continue to grow, you need to evaluate whether or not you're going to grow the users on that platform. So you always have this influence with you to try to push you away from a centralized platform to say, hey, can I solve an issue without spooling on more users onto the platform. Instead with Scoop, I get to say, hey, no, we're going to stick with this centralized platform. I don't have to worry about the number of users that I have. And I can make this my single pane experience all the way through.
One of the other areas that just we see to chime in on that is like another potential or potentiality of the more what we would think of as like a more legacy-based pricing model, especially in this space, right? And how fluid and dynamic that workforce is you will shove 15 users into one generic term, my design engineering team, as an example. And that's doable, and we've all probably been there. However, when you think about accountability, transparency, like one-to-one task management, you lose all of that in that ability, right? To not have kind of like timestamps and accountability at the user level. So I think there's a lot of knock-on effects that, yeah, John, you've something piqued your interest there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Something that gets me really excited is because I don't have a limit on users. I have like 8 different user accounts. I have admin plus john.mcnamara@arpsolar.com, and it is an admin account. I have a field specialist account. And so just the other day, we had a question pop up. We carry our financial information in our scoops, but it is limited out to who can see it. And there was a question that came from our founder, from Gary, that said, hey, in the media tab, I know you closed out the finances tab so that the field can't see that, but in the media tab, can they see the contract still there? And in real time, I was able just to log in Scoop in my field account and say, nope, no worries at all. This is what they're seeing. This is what the viewpoint there, and verify it. And that's a restriction that if I was in a more legacy platform, I might have to go find a user at that level and say, hey, can I borrow your phone for a second, and just make sure that I'm not disclosing any information that we don't want disclosed out at this level. So yeah, there's a lot of different benefits.
Well said.
That's awesome. I love just Tyrell saying one thing just sparked another little like eureka moment in your brain. That's awesome to see that happen live. Just last question here. What other applications do you currently have integrated with Scoop?
So we started off with Google Calendar. As far as that 5,000-foot view, one of the things that Gary was looking for is the ability to see where folks are. So Victor D'Souza gets a shout out from me as well, an amazing partner in building out that Glue integration. Again, something that I can't do. And Victor meets with me on a regular basis. We go over what the requirements are, where we want to go. We're actually transitioning as an organization to QuickBooks, and that is another integration that I think is really going to elevate our visibility at every single level. When you look at this invoiceable amount over time periods, to have that push and pull communication between QuickBooks and this is something that I'm very, very excited about in the future.
Awesome. All right, one last question, actually. Sorry.
Sure.
I'm sneaking another one in. How has Scoop helped your field teams, and how are they generally adopting the tool?
Very, very well. Very well, to the point of that real-time support with it as well. I brought in the field team. We did a day where I put the mobile view up on a big monitor. We walked through each of the different steps in there. In that meeting, I was taking feedback from them on how to improve the experience for them. It's been really solid. There's a couple bumps here and there where they'll have a challenge, and we'll come back and we'll diagnose it together, or I'll work with Mac to make sure that we've got everything set up appropriately. But it is centralizing the workflow that they use. And we used to have a site capture report for ARP. We would have a different site capture report for a different partner that we used. We had a different portal altogether that we were using for 2 different partners. And so right now, when I meet with a new potential partner for ARP, my question is, can you come on board to our platform? Not what platform do we have to come on board for you? And it is a stop for me at this point. It needs to be a really beneficial partnership if you're going to want to try to tempt me to do a different process than what we've got at our center.
That's powerful. Okay, all good on your side, Lucy?
All good. Take it away for some closing remarks.
Yeah, and really, I mean, first and foremost, John, a huge thank you to you, to your team, to Gary. You know, not only for the work that you all are pushing in your business and operation, but I think just the leadership and the sentiment that you have towards gathering folks, bringing people together in service of learning, growth. That has been true of our experience of you and the ARP team from day one, and I know there's an appetite for that. So you are a big reason for why we are here today. Again, I truly mean the first of many of these conversations with other folks in the Scoop community. And so that is the second thank you, which is to everyone who joined this session. Let us know if this was valuable, if you want to see more, if there's customers out there that feel like there's a great use case that they would love to show. We want to continue to have these conversations. So I know there will be a follow-up email with questions and just engagement. And of course, if you've seen Scoop for the first time and you want to learn more, I mean, that's what we're here for. So it's easy to get in touch with any of us on the session today. Wishing you all the very best, and hopefully see you not too long in the future for the next customer spotlight innovation session like we just went through with you, John. Thank you, John. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tyrell. Really appreciate you all.
Okay, take care, everyone. Bye.